Trapped deep within Kandahar's treacherous mountains, my patrol vanished. Sent to find them, we faced a nightmare that would change everything I thought I knew about warfare, about Afghanistan, and about what lurks in the darkest corners of our world. My name is Staff Sergeant Marcus Torres, and I've been leading reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan for 3 tours. I thought I'd seen everything this godforsaken country could throw at us. IEDs, ambushes, cave complexes that seemed to stretch into the Earth's core. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what we encountered in those ancient mountains near Kandahar. It was March 2010, and the Taliban had been unusually quiet in our sector. Too quiet. Command suspected they were using the mountain caves as a staging area for something big. That's when Alpha Team, led by Sergeant Rodriguez, went dark. 12 experienced soldiers, just gone. No distress calls, no GPS signals, nothing. Their last known position was a valley system the locals called Jahannam, hell. Torres, you're taking Bravo Team in, Colonel Matthews briefed me that morning. Find Alpha Team, assess the threat and report back. Intelligence suggests possible weapons cache in those caves, but intelligence was wrong, dead wrong. The locals in the nearby village wouldn't even look us in the eye when we asked about the mountains. An elderly man, his face weathered like ancient leather, grabbed my interpreter's arm and whispered something that made the younger man's face go pale. "What did he say?" I demanded. My interpreter, Hamid, hesitated. "He says, the old giants still walk there. He says to stay away after dark, that the caves are cursed." I should have listened. My team consisted of 6 of the best soldiers I'd ever worked with. Corporal Jackson, our medic, Specialist Williams, communications, Private First Class Chen, our demolitions expert, Sergeant Murphy, sniper, Private Anderson, heavy weapons, and myself. We'd operated together for 8 months, trusted each other with our lives countless times. The helicopter dropped us at the valley's entrance just before dawn. The mountains rose around us like jagged teeth, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds that seemed to press down with an almost supernatural weight. The terrain was brutal, loose shale, narrow passages, and caves that yawned like hungry mouths in the rock face. Alpha Team's last transmission came from Grid 774. Williams reported, checking his equipment, about 3 clicks northeast. We moved in standard formation, but something felt off from the beginning. The silence was too complete. In Afghanistan, there's always some sound, birds, insects, the distant echo of wind through rock. Here, nothing. Even our footsteps seem muffled, absorbed by the oppressive atmosphere. 2 hours in, we found Alpha Team's first checkpoint. Their gear was still there. Ammunition, water, even personal items. But no signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of what happened to 12 heavily armed soldiers. "This is wrong," Murphy muttered, scanning the ridgelines through his scope. 12 guys don't just evaporate. That's when Chen called out from near a cave entrance. "Sergeant, you need to see this." The cave mouth was massive, easily 20 feet high and 30 feet wide. But what caught our attention were the scratches in the rock around the entrance, deep gouges that looked almost like claw marks, but too large, too deliberate. And there was a smell emanating from the darkness within, something ancient and foul that made my stomach churn. "Equipment readings are off the charts in there," Williams said, checking his instruments. "But it's not electronic interference. It's like something else." I made the decision that would haunt us all. We're going in. Alpha Team's in there somewhere, and we're bringing them home. As we prepared our tactical lights and checked our weapons one final time, I noticed Anderson staring at the cave entrance with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Pure primal fear. "Sarge," he said quietly, "my grandmother used to tell stories about things like this. Back in Ireland, before she came to America, she said there were places where the old things still lived, waiting. I should have turned back then, should have called for extraction and reported the cave system as too dangerous. But 12 of our brothers were missing, and abandoning them wasn't an option. The darkness swallowed us whole as we entered the cave, our lights cutting through shadows that seemed to move independently of our presence. and somewhere in those depths, something ancient and terrible was waiting. The cave system was unlike anything in our intelligence briefings. The main tunnel stretched deeper than our lights could penetrate, with smaller passages branching off like arteries in some massive stone organism. The walls were smooth in places, almost polished, as if worn by countless years of something moving through them. "Jesus Christ," Jackson whispered, running his hand along the wall. "Look at these markings. What we'd initially mistaken for natural rock formations were actually symbols, crude but deliberate carvings that seemed to tell a story, figures that looked almost human, but wrong somehow. Too tall, with elongated limbs and what appeared to be 6 fingers on each hand. Local tribal art?" Chen suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Williams was monitoring our communications equipment, growing more agitated by the minute. "I'm getting something on the radio, but it's not from base. It's voices, speaking in no language I've ever heard." The deeper we went, the more evidence we found of Alpha Team's passage. A torn piece of uniform here, an empty magazine there, but also things that made no sense. Gouges in the stone walls at heights no human could reach, and a metallic smell that reminded me of blood, but somehow older, more primal. After 20 minutes of descent, we reached a junction where the main tunnel split into 3 passages. Murphy, checking his compass, frowned. "This is impossible. According to our heading, we should be moving northeast, but my compass is spinning like a carnival ride." That's when we heard it. A sound echoing from the leftmost passage that made every man freeze. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't animal either. A deep, resonant vocalization that seemed to vibrate through the rock itself, followed by what sounded distinctly like human voices, screaming. "Alpha Team," I said grimly. "Left passage. Move fast. Stay tight." The tunnel angled sharply downward, and the air grew thicker, more oppressive. Our lights began to flicker, despite fresh batteries, and Williams reported that his radio was picking up increasingly bizarre transmissions, what sounded like military chatter, but in that same unknown language we'd heard before. "Sarge," Anderson called out, stopping at what appeared to be a wider chamber ahead. "There's light coming from in there. Not artificial, something else." We approached the chamber cautiously, weapons ready. What we found defied explanation. The cavern was massive, easily the size of a football field, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. But it wasn't natural. The walls showed clear signs of construction, massive stone blocks fitted together with precision that would challenge modern engineering. And there was light. A dim, reddish glow emanating from crystalline formations embedded in the walls. In that eerie illumination, we could see the chamber wasn't empty. Scattered across the floor were pieces of military equipment, some modern, some that looked decades old. Russian gear, British equipment, and mixed among it, items that belonged to Alpha Team, but still no bodies, no clear indication of what had happened to the men. "My God," Murphy breathed, examining something near the far wall. "Sarge, you need to see this." He was standing next to what appeared to be a crude altar, a massive stone slab, stained dark, with something I didn't want to identify. Arranged around it were objects that made my blood run cold. Dog tags from various NATO forces spanning decades, personal effects, and weapons that looked like they'd been collected as trophies. Chen was examining the crystalline formations when he called out urgently, "These aren't natural formations. This is some kind of technology, ancient but definitely artificial, and it's still active. I'm reading energy signatures I can't identify." Williams, monitoring his equipment, suddenly went pale. "Sarge, I'm picking up movement. Multiple contacts coming from the deeper tunnels, big contacts, and they're moving fast." The sound we'd heard before echoed through the chamber again. Closer now, accompanied by what sounded like heavy footsteps, but the rhythm was wrong, too slow, too deliberate for human movement. "Defensive positions," I ordered, but my voice sounded hollow in the vast space. "Whatever's coming, we make our stand here." That's when Anderson spotted them first. Shapes moving in the deeper shadows beyond our light. Contact! Multiple hostiles, bearing 270! But as the figures moved into the red glow of the crystal formations, we realized these weren't insurgents or enemy combatants. They were something far worse. The first one that stepped into clear view was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with proportions that were almost human but grotesquely wrong. Its skin had a greyish pallor, and its hair was a deep red that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In its hands, it carried what appeared to be a spear, but one fashioned from metal and bone with a craftsmanship that spoke of intelligence, of purpose. But it was the eyes that truly terrified us. Ancient, intelligent, and filled with a hatred that seemed to burn from within. "What the hell are those things?" Jackson stammered. More shapes emerged from the tunnels, 4, then 6, then more than I could count. All similar in their terrible appearance, all armed with primitive but effective-looking weapons. And among them, scattered on the ground like discarded toys, were the remains of Alpha Team's gear. The largest of the creatures, the one with the spear, stepped forward and spoke, not in the unknown language we'd heard on the radio, but in broken, heavily accented English. "Soldiers," it said, its voice like grinding stone. "You come to sacred place. You join brothers in eternal service." That's when I saw them. Alpha Team, or what was left of them. They stood among the creatures, but something was wrong with their eyes. Empty, vacant, like they were looking through us rather than at us. They were alive but not themselves. Rodriguez, Alpha Team's leader, turned toward us with that same empty stare and spoke in a voice that wasn't quite his own. "Join us, Torres. The old ways are returning. The giants walk again." The sight of Rodriguez and his men standing among those creatures, their eyes vacant and wrong, shattered something fundamental in my understanding of reality. These weren't prisoners or hostages. They'd been changed, corrupted somehow by whatever ancient evil dwelt in these mountains. "Rodriguez!" I shouted, hoping to reach whatever remained of the man I'd served with for 2 years. "Snap out of it. We're here to extract you." But Rodriguez only tilted his head with an unnatural, bird-like motion and smiled, an expression that held no warmth, no recognition. "There is no extraction from the truth, Torres. The Nephilim have always been here, waiting beneath the earth. We are their servants now, as you will be." Nephilim. The word sent ice through my veins. I'd heard it before. In Sunday school as a kid, giants from biblical times, offspring of angels and humans. But this was Afghanistan. This was real combat, not some ancient mythology. The largest creature, the one with the spear, stepped forward, and I could see it more clearly in the crystal light. Its features were disturbingly human-like, but elongated, as if someone had stretched a human face on a larger frame. Its hands, gripping that massive spear, bore 6 fingers each, just like the cave drawings we'd seen. "I am Gorath," it spoke, its voice echoing with authority that commanded attention despite its broken English. "Last of the mountain princes. Your kind has forgotten us, pushed us into deep places, but we remember. We have always remembered." Murphy, our sniper, had his rifle trained on the creature but seemed hesitant to fire. "Sarge, what are our orders? Are we engaging or attempting extraction?" Before I could answer, one of Rodriguez's men, Private Martinez, whom I'd played cards with just a week ago, lurched forward with mechanical movements. "They showed us the truth," he said in that same hollow voice. "Showed us what lies beneath all the wars, all the fighting. Humans are not alone on this world. We never were." Williams was frantically working his radio equipment. "I can't raise base, Sarge. Something's jamming our signal, but I'm picking up transmissions in that unknown language from all over these mountains. There are more of them out there. A lot more." Chen had been studying the crystal formations and his face had gone ashen. "These energy readings, they're not just giving off light. They're some kind of communication network. This whole mountain system might be connected by these things." The creature called Gorath moved closer. its spear held at the ready. Behind it, more giants emerged from the shadows. I counted at least 15, each one massive and armed with weapons that looked primitive but deadly effective. Among them moved the members of Alpha Team like sleepwalkers, their humanity seemingly stripped away. "You have trespassed in our domain," Goreth continued, "brought your wars, your machines, your poison into sacred places. The old compact is broken. No longer will the giant clans hide in deep earth." Anderson, a heavy weapons specialist, was sweating despite the cool cave air. "Sarge, I've got a bad feeling about this. My grandmother's stories. She said the giants could do things to people's minds, make them servants." That's when Jackson, our medic, made a discovery that changed everything. Among the scattered equipment, he'd found Rodriguez's field journal. "Torres, you need to see this," he called out urgently. The journal's final entries were written in Rodriguez's handwriting, but the content was insane. Detailed drawings of the giants, descriptions of the awakening, and most disturbing of all, a map showing cave systems throughout Afghanistan, Pakistan, and beyond, all connected, all inhabited by what he called the Ancient Ones. The final entry, dated 3 days ago, read, "The giants speak truth. Humanity's wars serve their purpose. Every conflict, every battle feeds the anger that sustains them. They grow stronger while we grow weaker. Soon they will emerge. The surface world will remember why our ancestors feared the dark." But it was the addendum that made my blood freeze. "More patrols will come. We will be here to welcome them. The transformation is a gift. The giants offer immortality, purpose beyond the futile struggles of mortal men." I looked up to see Rodriguez watching me read, that terrible empty smile still on his face. "You understand now," he said. "This is bigger than Afghanistan, bigger than any war humans fight. The giants have been manipulating conflicts for millennia, feeding on the rage and fear. But now they're ready to rule openly again." Goreth raised his spear, and the other giants moved into flanking positions. "Choose," the creature rumbled. "Join willingly and keep your minds, your memories. Resist and become servants like these." It gestured toward Alpha Team with casual contempt. "There's a third option," Williams whispered, checking his explosives. "Chen, how much C4 do you have?" Chen's eyes lit up with understanding. "Enough to bring this whole chamber down, maybe damage their communication network." But Murphy was shaking his head, studying the giants through his scope. "These things are fast, Sarge, faster than they look, and smart. They're already moving to cut off our retreat route." I could see he was right. While Goreth had been talking, the other giants had spread out, blocking the tunnel we'd entered through. We were trapped in this ancient chamber with creatures that shouldn't exist, facing a choice between death, slavery, or something worse. That's when I noticed something that Goreth hadn't. Chen had been quietly placing charges near the crystal formations while we'd been distracted by the conversation. If those crystals really were some kind of communication network, destroying them might disrupt whatever hold these giants had over Alpha Team. "Listen carefully," I said quietly to my team, keeping my eyes on Goreth. "On my signal, hit the deck. Chen, blow those crystals. Everyone else, full auto on anything that moves." Rodriguez tilted his head again, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, a moment of recognition of the man he used to be, fighting against whatever had been done to him. "Torres," he said, and for just an instant his voice sounded normal. "If you can't save us, kill us. Don't let us become what they want us to be." Then his expression went vacant again, and Goreth raised his spear high, preparing to strike. I made the hardest decision of my military career. "Now!" I shouted. The explosions came first, Chen's charges detonating in perfect sequence around the crystal formations. The ancient chamber erupted in blinding light as the energy network that had pulsed for centuries was suddenly severed. The giants roared in what sounded like genuine pain, clutching their heads as if the destruction of the crystals had physically wounded them. In that moment of chaos, I saw something miraculous happen. Rodriguez and his men stumbled, blinking rapidly as if waking from a deep sleep. Whatever hold the crystals had maintained over their minds was broken, at least temporarily. "Alpha Team, get down!" I screamed as my men opened fire. The sound of 6 assault rifles firing on full automatic in the enclosed space was deafening. Our muzzle flashes strobed through the chamber like lightning as we poured rounds into the giants. But these creatures were built differently than humans. What should have been killing shots merely staggered them. Gorath charged toward me with that massive spear, moving with speed that defied his enormous size. I rolled to the side as the spear tip sparked off the stone where I'd been standing, leaving a gouge 6 inches deep in solid rock. "Aim for the head!" Murphy shouted, his sniper rifle cracking as he put 3 rounds center mass into one of the giants. The creature stumbled, but kept coming. Williams had taken cover behind a fallen boulder and was coordinating our fire. "Chen, we need more explosives. These things won't go down." But Chen was already moving, pulling grenades from his vest. "Fragmentation won't work, too much muscle mass, but I've got something better." He held up a white phosphorus grenade, the kind we used for clearing bunkers. Rodriguez and his men were slowly regaining their faculties, looking around the chamber with growing horror as they realized what they'd become part of. "Torres!" Rodriguez called out, his voice still slurred but becoming clearer. "The giants! They're not from here originally. This is a forward outpost. There are thousands more in deeper caves." Anderson had his machine gun blazing, the belt-fed weapon chattering as he swept fire across 3 giants who were trying to flank us. But even as they bled from multiple wounds, they kept advancing with terrifying determination. "Their nervous system is different," Jackson shouted over the gunfire. He'd managed to get close enough to examine one of the wounded giants. "The pain receptors aren't responding normally." One of the giants, nearly 9 feet tall with arms like tree trunks, grabbed Private Harris from Alpha Team and lifted him off the ground. But Harris, now free from mental control, pulled the pin on a grenade and held it against the creature's chest. "For Alpha Team!" he screamed as the explosion took both of them down. The sacrifice gave us the opening we needed. I could see that while the giants were incredibly tough, they weren't invincible. But conventional tactics weren't going to work. We needed to be smarter, more ruthless. "Murphy, can you hit that support beam?" I pointed to a massive stone column that appeared to be load-bearing for this section of the chamber. Murphy followed my gaze and grinned. "1 precision shot coming up." His rifle cracked once, and I watched as his round struck the explosives Chen had placed on the column during the initial chaos. The stone pillar exploded in a shower of debris, and a section of the ceiling began to collapse. 2 of the giants were caught in the rockfall, their roars cut short as tons of stone crushed them. But Gorath wasn't finished. The giant leader had blood streaming from wounds across his torso, but his eyes burned with ancient fury. He spoke rapidly in that unknown language, and suddenly the remaining giants began fighting with coordinated tactics that would have impressed any military strategist. "They're using military formations," Williams observed with shock. "These things have been studying human warfare." It was true. The giants had arranged themselves in a classic pincer movement, using the chamber's natural features for cover while they advanced. Their primitive weapons might have looked crude, but they wielded them with skill that spoke of centuries of combat experience. Rodriguez, now fully alert, had retrieved his sidearm and was fighting alongside us. "Torres, they showed me things in my mind," he gasped between shots. "Maps of their tunnel systems. This place connects to caves all through Central Asia. They've been watching our wars, learning from them." Chen had rigged another explosive, this one larger. "I can bring down this whole section of the mountain," he said grimly. "But we'll need to be in that tunnel when it goes off, or we're all dead." The problem was getting to the tunnel. Gorath and his remaining giants, I counted 7 still standing, had positioned themselves between us and our escape route. And these creatures showed no intention of letting us leave alive. That's when I remembered something from my grandfather's stories about fighting in World War II. Sometimes the best military strategy was the simplest one. "Williams, do you still have signal flares?" I asked. "3 left. Why? These things have been living in darkness for centuries." "Chen, when I give the signal, detonate that charge. Williams, pop all 3 flares at once. Everyone else, when they're blinded, we run for the tunnel and don't stop until we're out of this mountain." Murphy shook his head. "That's a hell of a gamble, Sarge." "Better than dying in here," I replied. Gareth seemed to sense we were planning something. The giant leader raised his spear and spoke in English one final time. "You cannot escape the truth. The giants have returned. Your surface world will burn as the ancient world burned." "Maybe," I said, pulling the pin on my last grenade. "But you won't be around to see it." I hurled the grenade directly at Gareth's feet and shouted, "Now!" The flares ignited simultaneously, filling the chamber with brilliant white light that turned the giant's roars of pain into screams of genuine agony. In that moment of blindness, Chen triggered his massive charge. The explosion was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The entire mountain seemed to shake as millions of tons of stone shifted above us. Through the chaos of falling rock and blinding light, we ran for our lives toward the tunnel entrance. Behind us, I could hear Gareth's final roar of rage as the chamber collapsed, burying the ancient communication network and hopefully trapping the remaining giants under hundreds of feet of stone. But as we reached the tunnel, I realized our fight was far from over. More roars echoed from the deeper passages, and the mountain itself seemed to be awakening around us. The mountain was coming alive around us as we sprinted through the tunnels. What had started as distant roars from the deeper cave systems was rapidly becoming a symphony of rage that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. The giants we'd awakened weren't just angry, they were mobilizing. "The whole damn mountain is full of them," Rodriguez panted as we ran. Behind us, the sound of massive footsteps echoed through the tunnels, growing closer with each passing second. "Torres, what I saw in those visions. There are colonies throughout these mountain ranges. We just kicked a hornet's nest the size of Afghanistan." Williams was trying desperately to raise base on his radio as we moved. "Still nothing but static, Sarge. But I'm picking up massive seismic activity. Whatever we did down there, it's triggering something big." The tunnel system seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of us, but worse. We could hear movement from the side passages, more giants emerging from deeper chambers, converging on our position. Chen was checking his remaining explosives with growing concern. "I've got enough C4 left to maybe seal one more passage," he reported. "But at the rate they're coming, we'll be overrun before we reach the surface." That's when Murphy made a discovery that changed our tactical situation entirely. Checking his scope through a gap in the tunnel wall, he called out urgently, "Sarge, you need to see this. The valley we dropped into, it's not empty anymore." I looked through the gap and felt my blood turn to ice. The valley floor, which had been barren when we'd arrived, was now swarming with movement. Dozens of giants were emerging from cave entrances we hadn't even noticed, and they weren't just the red-haired variety we'd encountered. Some were larger, some had different colorations, and all of them were armed and moving with military precision toward our extraction point. "Jesus Christ," Anderson whispered. "How many of these things are there?" Jackson, who'd been helping the wounded members of Alpha Team, looked up with growing alarm. The men they had under mental control, they're starting to remember things. Specialist Morrison says the giants showed him maps of their territories. This isn't just Afghanistan. They're in Pakistan, Iran, even as far as the Caucasus Mountains. Rodriguez nodded grimly. They've been using the conflict zones as cover. Every time there's a war in these regions, they study our tactics, capture our people, expand their territory. We've been training them to fight us without even knowing it. The sound of approaching giants was getting louder, and I could see lights, not electric, but the same reddish glow we'd seen from the crystals, moving through the side tunnels. They were organizing a coordinated pursuit. "Movement ahead," Murphy called out. 3 contacts blocking the main passage. We rounded a bend and came face to face with 3 giants, each one slightly different from Gorath's group. These looked older somehow, with pale skin that seemed almost translucent and eyes that glowed with an inner light. They spoke in unison, their voices creating harmonics that made the tunnel walls vibrate. "Surface dwellers," they intoned. "You have destroyed the speaking stones. The deep councils stir. War comes to the upper world." Chen didn't wait for diplomatic negotiations. He threw his remaining white phosphorus grenade directly at the group. The chemical fire that erupted sent the giants screaming back into the side passages, but not before one of them spoke a single word in that unknown language. Immediately, every tunnel around us lit up with the red glow, and the sound of approaching footsteps multiplied tenfold. "They're calling reinforcements," Williams realized with horror. That was some kind of alarm. We kept running, but the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The tunnel ahead split into 3 directions, and we had no way of knowing which led to the surface. Worse, the giants seemed to know these caves intimately. They were using alternate routes to get ahead of us. "We're being herded," Murphy observed. "They want us to go a specific direction." He was right. Every time we tried to take a different path, giants would appear to block it, forcing us toward the leftmost tunnel. It felt like a trap, but we had no choice but to spring it. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the first but still massive, and waiting for us was something that made Gorath look like a child in comparison. The giant that stood in the center of the chamber was at least 13 feet tall, with skin that looked like weathered stone, and eyes that held intelligence far beyond anything we'd encountered. Its hair was not red like the others, but pure white, and it wore armor that looked both ancient and incredibly sophisticated. But what truly terrified me was that it spoke perfect English. "I am Nefek Thar," it said in a voice like grinding mountains. "First of the deep kings, older than your civilizations, you have awakened something that has slept for 3,000 years. Around the chamber, I could see what had happened to other military units over the years. Equipment from multiple armies, Soviet, British, American, was arranged like trophies, and among them, dog tags that probably represented decades of missing personnel. Your wars have served us well," Nefekthar continued. "Each conflict brings us new knowledge, new slaves, new strength. But you have broken the speaking stones. Now the compact is ended." Rodriguez stepped forward, his military bearing intact despite everything he'd been through. "What compact?" The giant king smiled, revealing teeth like broken marble. "The agreement made long ago. When your kind first learned to make war, we would remain hidden, taking only what we needed from your conflicts. In return, your species would be allowed to flourish on the surface." "But now?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Now we reclaim what was always ours. The upper world, the surface kingdoms, all of it. Your satellites, your aircraft, your weapons. We have studied them all through the minds of your captured soldiers. We are ready." Williams was frantically working his radio, and suddenly his face lit up. "Sarge, I'm getting through to base. Signal's weak, but they're responding." The transmission crackled with static, but I could make out Colonel Matthews' voice. "Torres, what's your status? We're reading massive seismic activity in your sector. Colonel, we need immediate extraction and a full strike package." I called into the radio. "The mountains are compromised. We've got hostile contacts, size unknown, requesting danger close fire mission on our position." But before Matthews could respond, Nefekthar gestured, and Williams' radio sparked and died. The giant king's eyes glowed brighter as he spoke again. "Your surface leaders will learn soon enough. The giants return to wage war properly. No more hiding, no more taking scraps from your battlefields. This time, we claim the victory." That's when I realized the true scope of what we were facing. This wasn't just about Afghanistan or even Central Asia. These creatures had been preparing for a global conflict, studying human military doctrine for decades through captured personnel. They had technology we didn't understand, numbers we couldn't estimate, and knowledge of our capabilities that came from inside our own ranks. The war we thought we were fighting against insurgents and terrorists was nothing compared to what was about to begin. Neferkthar raised his hand, and dozens of giants emerged from passages around the chamber. But these weren't the primitive spear carriers we'd faced before. These carried weapons that looked like a fusion of ancient craftsmanship and modern technology. Energy weapons powered by those crystal formations, armor that seemed to absorb our muzzle flashes, and coordination that spoke of military training that spanned centuries. "You will be the first to bear witness," the giant king declared. "When your surface armies come to these mountains, we will be ready. And this will be only the beginning." What happened next defied every tactical manual I'd ever studied. As Neferktar's giants closed in around us, the mountain itself began to shake with an intensity that had nothing to do with our earlier explosives. Through cracks in the chamber walls, a brilliant white light began to pour in, accompanied by a sound I'd never heard before, like the roar of massive engines, but with harmonics that seemed almost musical. "What the hell is that?" Chen shouted over the growing din. Williams, despite his broken radio, was staring at readings on his backup equipment with disbelief. "Those aren't seismic readings anymore, Sarge. That's aircraft, massive aircraft directly above us." Neferktar's expression changed from confident triumph to something approaching concern. He barked orders in that ancient language, and his giants began moving with sudden urgency, rather than the leisurely confidence they'd shown before. That's when the ceiling of the chamber simply disappeared. I don't mean it collapsed or was destroyed. It vanished, as if something had surgically removed hundreds of feet of solid stone without disturbing anything else. Above us, framed against the afternoon sky, was a craft unlike anything in human aviation. Sleek, silent, despite the sounds we'd heard, and easily the size of 3 football fields. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Murphy breathed. "What is that thing?" But Rodriguez was staring upward with recognition dawning in his eyes. During the mental connection with the giants, I saw flashes of other memories. Not theirs, something else. Something that's been watching this conflict for a very long time. Light beams descended from the craft, but they weren't spotlights. They were some kind of energy field that made the giants freeze in place like statues. Neferkthar tried to speak, but no sound emerged from his throat. A voice spoke then, not from the craft, but seemingly from the air itself. It was calm, measured, and spoke in perfect English, with no accent I could identify. "The experiment is concluded," it said. "The primitive species has demonstrated sufficient aggression and technological adaptation. The hybrid specimens will be contained." "Hybrid specimens," I whispered. But even as I said it, I understood. The giants weren't the original inhabitants of these mountains. They were something else, a mixture of human and something far older, created as part of some vast experiment. The voice continued. "Human subjects, Torres, Marcus, and team will be extracted for debriefing. Memory modification protocols will be applied to ensure operational security." "Wait!" I called out to the empty air. "We won't say anything. We understand the need for secrecy." There was a pause, and when the voice spoke again, there seemed to be something like amusement in its tone. "Your species always assumes cooperation will save you. This is noted for future reference." But instead of the memory modification we'd been promised, something unexpected happened. The energy beams shifted, surrounding us with a gentle light that felt warm rather than threatening. When my vision cleared, we were standing in the valley where we'd originally been dropped off, our extraction helicopter approaching from the south. Of the giants, the chambers, the ancient technology, there was no trace. The mountain looked exactly as it had when we'd arrived, except for one detail that made my blood run cold. Where the cave entrance had been, there was now a perfectly smooth stone wall with a symbol carved into it, the same 6-fingered hand we'd seen in the tunnel drawings. Colonel Matthews's voice crackled over William's radio, which was somehow working again. "Torres, report. We lost your signal for several hours. What's your status? I looked at my team and the surviving members of Alpha Team. We all remembered everything, despite whatever had just happened to us. Rodriguez caught my eye and nodded slightly. He understood what I was thinking. Colonel, we found Alpha Team, I reported. 11 KIA, 1 survivor. We encountered hostile forces in the cave system. Recommend this area be designated off-limits for future operations. It wasn't entirely a lie. We had found Alpha Team, though not in the condition we'd reported, and we had encountered hostile forces, even if they weren't the kind Command would believe. The extraction went smoothly, but as our helicopter lifted off, I caught a glimpse of something that confirmed my suspicions about what we'd really experienced. In the distance, other craft were visible, the same sleek design as the one that had intervened in the chamber. They were positioned over mountain ranges throughout the region, and as I watched, they simply faded from view as if they'd never been there. Back at base, we were all debriefed separately. The official report classified the incident as an encounter with a previously unknown insurgent cell using cave systems for weapons storage. Alpha Team's casualties were attributed to a tunnel collapse triggered by explosives, but the real story didn't end there. Over the following months, I began to notice patterns in military reports from around the world. Cave systems in various conflict zones were being quietly sealed or declared off-limits. Personnel who reported unusual encounters in mountainous regions were being transferred to different units or retiring early. And most telling of all, advanced archaeological surveys were being conducted in areas where giants had been reported in historical texts. Rodriguez and I stayed in contact after our tours ended. He'd done his own research and discovered that similar incidents had been occurring for decades, military units encountering things that shouldn't exist, only to have their reports buried or explained away. But the pattern was always the same. Human forces stumbling onto something ancient, intervention by unknown technology, and official silence. You think they're still out there? Rodriguez asked me during one of our conversations. The giants, I mean. I think whatever we encountered was just the tip of the iceberg, I replied. And I think something a lot more powerful than us is making sure it stays hidden. The symbol from the mountain had appeared in my dreams for months afterward, 6 fingers reaching towards something I couldn't see. But gradually, the dreams changed. Instead of reaching, the hand was waving, not in greeting but in warning. 3 years after Afghanistan, I was working as a military contractor when I received an encrypted message with no return address. It contained satellite images of the Kandahar Mountains, dated just a week prior. The caves were open again, and there were structures visible near the entrances that definitely weren't there when we'd left. The message contained only one line of text. The experiment continues. Watch the skies. I've been watching ever since. Because I know now that our little war in Afghanistan was just one small part of something much larger. The giants were never the real threat. They were specimens, like lab rats in a maze. And whatever's running the experiment is still out there, still watching, still learning about human nature through our conflicts. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if every war we've ever fought has been observed by those craft, catalogued and studied by intelligences that see us as nothing more than interesting animals. The thought should terrify me, but instead, it's almost comforting. Because if we're being studied, it means we're worth studying. It means that despite everything, the violence, the hatred, the endless conflicts, there's something about humanity that even beings capable of manipulating matter and energy find fascinating. The mountains keep their secrets well, but they also keep their promises. And the promise carved into that stone wall was clear. We are not alone. We are not in control. And the war we think we're fighting is not the war that's actually being fought. I carry that knowledge with me every day now, along with the certainty that someday, when the experiment is complete, we'll learn what we've really been preparing for all these years. The giants may be gone, but their legacy remains, a reminder that reality is far stranger and more dangerous than any of us dare to imagine.